what's the beginning and end of humanity? Is a monkey and a human very different? Is an animal and a human very different? What are the similarities and what are the differences? And for me, this is a really interesting area.
This is the other side of what Martino got.
Trying to make work that's really about right now is very difficult because it's hard to see where you are currently. I think the point is visual. The communication aspect of it is really secondary. If we could go back, we'd see that we're hallucinating. When I'm making my work, it's not portraiture. I don't have someone sitting in front of me and I'm not trying to copy an actual human. I try and embrace how incorrect memory can be. So I try and remember what a body's like. I don't look at my hand and try and copy a hand or try and copy a face from a photo or anything like this. I'm working the material in reference to human bodies, but remembered human bodies. And for me, it's quite important that they're incorrect and they're not looking just right or just so. Because I read a lot of science fiction and always have, I think I'm very comfortable with the idea that there's no utopia nor dystopia. I'm from New Zealand, and in New Zealand when I was growing up there were a lot of Swiss people and Germans that had moved, usually craftspeople, to New Zealand, often to quite rural areas, thinking that New Zealand was utopia because it was free, it was a very beautiful landscape, you could buy a big piece of land and live somewhere beautiful. And again I met them in the last 20 years as older people, really questioning what they'd come out to see. I think there's no such thing as a utopia, and I think unfortunately there probably are dystopias on this earth. But even though this work is about both the future and the past, I think dystopia, utopia is not really the point. I think of my works not as characters or personalities, but as more like husks or costumes. So they're not like dolls. I guess they're maybe more like puppets that the animation would have to come from without. I think that they could be red, like you could somebody's clothing, but I think it might stop there. I had a really lovely teacher called Nancy Bracey at school. I was very, very messy and I coloured outside the lines. My handwriting was disgusting. So I always thought I was bad at art because at school, when you're younger, good art is clean and tidy art. But she really woke me up to mess and line and colour and I guess the sculptural aspects of art as well. And I realised that I did have the skills and I really loved doing it. So at art school, I was really working a lot on kinetic works and works that were installed. I made some really nuts stuff like a corridor of itchy jumpers that you had to walk through, or very subtle pieces of string that were twirling around in space. My first show ever at art, what was it called? high street art project in Christchurch when I was, I think, 17 or 18. I had long hair, and I cut it all off even shorter than this in one big chop. And I kept all that hair and made it into a bit like eyelashes, but very long eyelashes, and planted all my hair within all the floorboards of the work, of the gallery. So it looked like the whole gallery had nothing in it to begin with, but then as you came in, you'd see that my blonde hair was really the same colour as the floor, and that there was almost like grass sprouting out from the floor. Recently I've been wondering how my practice now relates to my early practice as a sculptor, and I realised that the way that I set up rooms and show my sculptures is really related to that early investigation into installation art. There's an ongoing theme with figuration. I think that started when I moved to London in 1998. I didn't have a very big studio. I was working at a kitchen table, and I found a squat with a friend, Luc Gatelier, and we decided to run an art space there. We had a really beautiful space. It was very big, if very dirty, and I had my work, which was a mummy, on the floor there, and to go with that I made some very colourful pieces so that you didn't trip over it, because like my hair, it was the same colour as the floor. And then after that, I think I've always worked with figuration of some kind of another, because I really realised that a mummy is actually a kind of human figure, and there's always been a little bit of that human body aspect in my work. So now a lot of the human figures are things like centaurs or mermaids, so they're not true humans, but there's a reference to a human body there too.
See the insects around it. The rubber attracts the insect.
Really?
Yeah. When I'm working, sometimes it's just like insects coming from everywhere. In Brazil, terrible, like mosquitoes all over everything.
The materials really make a difference too. The works in this room are slow. They're made with a polymer plastic. So I can, over many hours or days, work on these faces, come back to them after a week, and then they're cooked in an oven. And then after that I can sand them and paint them, and it's quite a long, time-consuming process. Whereas in this show, a lot of the other work is made of rubber. The rubber is a very fast material. I heat it up to make it malleable, and I sculpt it often under a bath of cold water. So when I'm working with that, I'll make a face in 5 or 10 minutes rather than hours or days. So you can really see that the type of figuration is very, very much connected to the material. Yeah, working with the rubber is certainly a chaotic process.
Bubble wrap that we can put around the neck.
It's so fast, and you cannot control things.
If you go upright, 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 up.
I make armatures for bigger pieces, and I make drawings for what I'm trying to do, but it's very, it's more like a direction. Like I cannot at all make pieces look like each other. I can't, because it's floppy, and often I'm having to work with 2 or 3, or sometimes with that big dinosaur next door, 5 other people. So I have to trust the people I'm working with, and also let myself be looser.
His hands are looking really nice. Just make sure those fingers don't go too crazy.
And that really helps develop the work and get things moving on. A few years ago, I was invited to make some works for Art Gallery in New South Wales, and I came up with these very long beings. Some were 6 or 7 metres tall, and eventually I made these 3 very large works, and I'm very happy with them. I think they look amazing, but I don't think they're any more important than my small works. Sometimes the work that you make in 20 minutes is as valid, if not a better work, because it with a small work I have full control. With a really large work I have to work with a massive team, which has its own rewards, but really does mean I have to give away a lot of the control. And so it really made me think a lot about the hierarchy of scale and whether and why we do think one thing's more important than the other. I guess a lot of it's about a really long history of white men's work being more important and women's work, which was often in the home, domestic. I guess women aren't so strong. That often tends to be smaller work, more hand work. There's a supremacy in the art world often for big, heavy things, and I guess in my shows I'm often trying to balance it out a bit. Larger sculptures, yeah, I guess it is more egotistical, especially a big outdoor piece, because it's, for example, the piece in Art Gallery New South Wales, it's permanent and it's going to be there for, I assume, at least my lifetime. So it's scary because it's one piece that I do want to make in a similar kind of intuitive, quick way that I make my other smaller works. But you do start to second guess yourself because you think that this one's going to be around and everyone's going to see it. And I guess maybe that's why I start to insist that the small works are just as important, because I don't want to be judged just on the big things. And that doesn't tell the whole story at all. I used to keep a dream diary for a long time, and it's very easy in the future to look at past dreams and understand exactly what they mean. But I think it's very hard to know the next morning how that fits. And I think that artworks, for me, operate in a very similar way. I like them to be a spontaneous idea which I make. I don't overplan the works at all, and then try and understand what they mean afterwards. But I read a lot of science fiction. I've worked with dinosaurs a lot in my work too, because I think it started because I was getting increasingly anxious about climate change, and I didn't really want to get into an anxious spiral because I can do what I can do about this, but I can't really help the whole world heal. And I started to think about dinosaurs, and that's also my kind of shorthand for don't freak out about this. It's like, well, dinosaurs had a massive climate event and they're gone, and would it be so bad if we did too? It's a little bit of a it's out of your hands kind of thought. Also, the thing I like about dinosaurs is when I was talking before about figures and trying to get them wrong and not worrying about them being exactly right and working from memory, I think that humans and the relationship with dinosaurs is a little bit like this. We find their bones and we think we can work out what they looked like and how they stood and how their skin was and if they had feathers and if they were coloured. But it's absolute rubbish, and I'm sure that we've got everything wrong, and if we could go back, we'd see that we're hallucinating.